Hello, and thank you for joining us today on Go Ed Tech Go. Today we have Ivan Lopez. He is an undergrad, or was an undergrad at UCLA, and is now committed to Stanford for medical school. So thanks for joining us today, Ivan, to talk to our students.
Yeah, no problem.
So we know that you have a connection. Miss Coffey made the connection because you knew her from middle school. But can you talk about the path you took that led you to UCLA?
Yeah, of course. I think it would be important for me to first talk about my experiences growing up in Roseman. So I grew up, spent most of my childhood in Roseman. I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school there. And it's significant to say that growing up, I didn't really see myself going to college. And when I would reflect on why that was a thing, I always remember thinking about kind of like my environment. So Rosemond is part of Kern County, and Kern County doesn't have a lot of money. Rosemond has a lot of under-resourced high schools, and I think that it had a really big impact on me and what I thought I could achieve in higher education. Just an example, so I was in band and track in high school, and a lot of times we would go to these really big schools like Valencia High School or Golden Valley High School, Hart High School, and these schools have a lot of money. They have money for new computers. They have money for new books. Their desks are new. Even the classrooms, like they have money to upkeep them and keep them looking nice. And we would go to these schools for competitions, and you kind of compare what you would see at these schools, and you compare that to like where you come from, and you kind of think to yourself, you know, why would I apply to college when these schools can select someone that comes from a good school like this? That's kind of like the mentality that I had growing up. And it was actually, if it wasn't for my high school teachers that really pushed me to start thinking about higher education and started to actually show me that, you know, going to college and succeeding in college is something that I could achieve. You know, if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have had the courage to go ahead and apply to colleges and actually get into a university like UCLA. So that was, I kind of thought like that until my second year of high school. So I think it's also important to say that even though I never really saw myself in higher education, I still tried a lot in school. So it was, ever since I was in elementary school, I always did my best to get the best grade possible I can in my classes. So when I realized that, you know, going to college was something that I could actually do. I was a third year in high school. It was the first semester, and so by that time, I already had good grades my first and second year of high school. So that definitely helped, and that definitely did keep me motivated, because now that I actually had this vision, I had this seed implanted in me by my high school teachers that really motivated me to go on and apply to college. It just motivated me even more. So, you know, leading up to applying to UCLA, I definitely tried a lot in high school, and I got as involved as I could in extracurricular activities.
And that's good. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something very important that we try to talk to our students about. You didn't know what you were going to do, but you didn't close the doors by not performing in high school, and by saying, hey, I'm going to do the best that I can. That opened up doors for you later on when you decided you did know what you were going to do.
Yeah, that I think about that a lot, and I think you know, definitely my parents had a large role in that because they've always shown me, you know, how important it is to try in school and how important it is like to learn and not to throw away your education because my parents didn't have that privilege. They immigrated from another country without a high school education, so coming here they always emphasized how important it was to try in school. And even though I had no idea what I wanted to do, you know, those values still stuck to me. And it helped me a lot because, like I said, when I realized that I wanted to go to college, I didn't have to kind of like pull myself up from a low GPA. I kind of already had a high GPA that I could keep, you know, maintaining to be able to be a competitive applicant to a four-year university.
You know, and that kind of ties into a couple things. So you mentioned that you were involved with extracurricular activities. You mentioned band, you mentioned sports, but you ultimately got into UCLA, which is a big feat to accomplish. And so, just from when you were in high school, what sort of like high-end courses were you in, advanced courses, or extracurricular activities were you in that you feel like really gave you that edge applying to UCLA?
Yeah, that is a really important question. So I when I was in college, I would go back to my high school and I would kind of share my experiences at UCLA with the high school students to kind of get them motivated to start thinking about college. And you know, I always one story that I would always tell them is during orientation, I met a lot of new people, like my future classmates, and all of them came in with an insane amount of college credits. They would come in with like 100 college credits, and they're a first year, but they have like junior standing. And you know, I took all the APs my high school had to offer, and I only came in with like 16, and so I was still freshman standing, and standing matters a lot because if you're a first year and you come in with junior standing, then you get a junior pass for selecting classes, so you could pick your classes first. And you know that can mean the difference between taking a class now or having to wait to take a class later, or maybe taking a class at 10 a.m. versus taking a class at 8 a.m. So it's definitely really nice having those extra college credit boosts. So I would always tell people, you know, if you have that opportunity to take AP classes or to take IB classes, or if you live near a community college and you can go to that community college and take community college courses when you're in high school, 100% take advantage of that opportunity and do it. Like I wish my high school had those resources when I was there, because when you eventually go to college, it's not also about the credits, it's also about what you learn. Like another example is one of the first classes I took my first year at UCLA was general chemistry. And the last time I took general chemistry was my second year of high school. So I had to study a lot. Like I would study more than 8 hours a day because it was hard, and I knew nothing about chemistry going into college. When my friends that lived on my floor, you know, they already took general chemistry because they lived near a community college and they took it in high school. So they already knew all the material, and they had more time to do other things. So you know, it also helps you in that way too. But I think you also were wanting me to mention some of the extracurricular activities that I got involved with. So I think I was really involved in high school, and one important thing that I think universities look at when they're going through their admissions process is that they want to see that the students that they're reviewing are passionate about something. And you know, I never did something in high school because I thought it would make me a good applicant for a university. I always did it because it was something that I loved to do. So, you know, I was in band all 4 years. I would get involved with mathletes. I really cared about volunteering. So I would volunteer at AV Hospital. I volunteered there all 4 years of high school. Among other things like leadership positions that I wanted to get involved with. So I think one important thing when you're thinking about, applying to university is that there's no cookie cutter way you can build your application to be competitive. What you should really focus on is just focus on doing what you like to do and getting involved in that way.
That's great advice. You talk about all the good things that you had going, and how they looked at you in certain ways, but what are some pitfalls in high school that you would caution students around?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say don't get so caught up in figuring out what you want to do in high school, because I know hundreds and thousands of people that think they want to do something in high school. They go to college and then they realize that this is not what they want to do. They don't love any of it, and they go explore other fields, and then they eventually find what they want to do. So yeah, I would say being in high school should be your time to explore. So, if you're interested in medicine, just an example, if you're interested in medicine, that's cool. You should explore that interest, but don't neglect other opportunities. If you have an opportunity to explore business or engineering for a summer, maybe, jump on that opportunity, take it, see if you like that field. So I think that that's a really important aspect of being a high school student that a lot of people don't really think about.
Yeah, for sure. But for you, at some point, you had your mind set on being a physician, or going to med school, correct?
Yeah.
So what was it, or maybe even both, what was it and when was it that you became interested in becoming a physician?
Yeah. So going into UCLA, I actually didn't want to go into medicine. I thought I wanted to be an engineer. Uh, I really liked math and physics. I really liked calculus, and being an engineer, you get to use all those tools on in your daily routine. Um, but I actually realized when I was in college that being an engineer wasn't something that I fit into. And I think what engineering lacked was that human interaction. I really like teaching and mentoring, and my experiences with engineering as an undergrad didn't show me a lot of teaching and mentoring in engineering. So I started to look at other places where I would feel most fulfilled, and that's when I discovered medicine, and how I became involved with that field, and how I eventually saw myself pursuing a career in medicine happened through some of the classes that I took at UCLA. So I took a random class because it sounded interesting to me, and I had no idea what it was about. It one of the names and one of the topics in the course was social determinants of health, and I remember one of my older friends talking about social determinants of health, and what she was telling me was really interesting, because she was telling me things that I would see people from my home community struggle with. So I took the class because I wanted to explore my interest, and that class was really eye-opening for me. I would learn about these different health disparities, and I would learn about all these different social determinants of health. And what was most impactful for me was the things that I was learning in that classroom. Those were the things that my friends and family were experiencing, like an inability to access healthcare, or like inability to maintain good cardiovascular health, and among a list among other things that fall into health disparities. and it really bothered me, and I wanted to see change. And that's when I initially started to actually see myself pursuing something in medicine. And then, throughout my time in college, as I got more experiences, I started to, really refine the idea of what I wanted to do in the future. And eventually it just led me to applying to medical school.
That's great. It's good because our students are kind of in that same demographic, in Kern County here,
Yeah.
the same type of thing. So those are good lessons to learn as you move on. We want to move on to your undergrad a little bit. I know that you go to UCLA now, you're going to Stanford. I know that has to be stressful as an undergrad and probably even more stressful as a graduate student. But how do you balance that life, that stress? What do you do outside of school to kind of balance and kind of keep that good mental state?
Yeah, that's also a really great question. So I think one important thing is sleeping. So a lot of people think that if you're not sleep deprived, if you're not chronically sleep deprived in college, then you're doing something wrong. But you know, people always underestimate how powerful sleep is. It's important for your mental health, you know, and sometimes pulling that all-nighter may not be as beneficial for you as getting a good night's sleep, because there's a lot of research papers that show that when you're sleeping during REM sleep, that's when you consolidate memories. So if you're not sleeping and you're not going through REM sleep, then you're not giving your brain the time to really consolidate those memories. So just staying up and studying, you're just gonna forget it. And other things that I would do was I was really involved with band in college as well. So when I would be studying all day, and then I had practice coming up. So going to practice for band was a really great way to kind of decompress and to do something different, to hang out with my friends, and to do something that I love to do, which is play music. Other things, I really like playing basketball and going to the gym. And I always made sure, no matter how busy I was, I always made sure I gave myself, an hour and a half to 2 hours every day to go to the gym and to play basketball or to lift weights and to just do something that isn't academic. And I was really involved as an undergraduate student, and same deal. How I said in high school, you should do things that you're passionate about, and you should get involved in activities that you love to do. Same thing goes with college. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in extracurriculars when you're an undergrad, and you should definitely take advantage of those opportunities, because it's important to learn in the classroom, but you get involved in all these extracurriculars, and you learn other things about yourself that you wouldn't learn from reading books or going to lecture or studying. So
okay, another aspect of college life for you at UCLA is the area of living in the dorms.
yeah.
Or did you live in the dorms at UCLA?
Yeah, so out of the 4 years I was there, I lived in a dorm for 3 years.
Okay. And I guess the question is, was there a benefit to living on campus during those 3 years that you saw?
Yes, definitely a huge benefit. So when I went to UCLA, I was the only person from my high school that was there. So I didn't know anybody. And having the opportunity to live on campus at UCLA, they're high-rise buildings, and each floor has around 80 people on it. And each floor has RAs, so resident assistants. So out of those 80 people, 2 of them will be kind of like the leaders of the floor, and they hold a bunch of activities and a bunch of social events for you to be able to get to know the people on your floor. And in addition to that, if you have roommates, a lot of times you get to become really close with your roommates, especially if they're studying things similar to what you're studying, and if y'all are in the same classes. So I think That's a huge advantage. One of my friends, her sister was also going to UCLA, and she decided to live with her sister off campus. And she would always tell me how it was a little bit difficult for her to find kind of that community, that strong, supportive friend group because she was living off campus. Because usually what happens is, when your first 2 years, you live on campus, so you could meet people, meet friends, form study groups. And then once you have that strong connection with those people, you could move off campus for your third and fourth year.
Yeah, and that socialization seems to be really important, especially when you're studying something like medicine as an undergrad, right? So when
Yeah.
you're in the undergrad situation and you have this socialization happening, did you do more studying on your own, or did you like to do it kind of in a group setting?
Yeah. So I felt like I studied really well in a group setting because what my friends and I did was um, we would always find a place on campus that had a whiteboard. And so UCLA was really nice because you could go onto the campus and you can find an empty room and you could just study in there. So what we would do was we would go on campus, find an empty room with a whiteboard, and we would ask each other to go over different topics. And that was really helpful because if you can teach a topic really well, then that means that you know it well. And if you're having trouble explaining a topic, then you know where you have to focus your studying on. And then in addition to that, sometimes I'd be sitting there and my friend would be going over a topic, and my friend would say something that I had no idea was said in lecture that was important, so I'd be able to write it down. So studying in groups I think it's incredibly powerful. But I also made time for self-study too. I think it's nice to be able to get away from people and find a nice quiet place where there's no one else around, and just put on some headphones, listen to music, and just like read and study by myself for a few hours. So I think it's good to find a balance between the two, but definitely don't underestimate the power of studying with other people.
Okay, and that kind of segues even to the next topic, is the idea of collaboration and kind of working with students, even with professors. And just your opinion now as somebody who has successfully graduated from UCLA onto a really prestigious medical school. How, with collaboration, how important is it when it comes to being successful in college at any level?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I should note that the culture of being a pre-medical student can be toxic, and it's something that people are actively addressing. And I think there's changes being made to address these issues. And applying to medical school can be really competitive, and there's a term for people that don't collaborate well, and they're also pre-medicine, and they're called gunners. And essentially, I don't know. The first time I heard that was in college. I don't know if people use that in high school still too, but yeah, they call them gunners because, like I said, applying to medical school is really competitive, and a lot of times, uh, if you ask someone for help and they're a gunner, then maybe they won't maybe they won't help you as well as they know how to help you. If you know what I'm saying, like they won't give you all the resources because they want to do well in that class and they don't want anyone else to do well in that class. And that definitely exists. It's a true thing within the pre-medical community, and I think it's terrible. So it doesn't also it like does damage to the gunner, and it also does damage to the people around them. And I'm really big on collaboration. I think collaboration is super important for your own success, and you shouldn't feel like the only way you could succeed is for other people to fail around you. You can all succeed together, you can all do well together. um, and there are other aspects where collaboration is super important. It's not only exclusive to being a pre-med student or medicine. I spent a lot of time in research, and after finishing undergrad, I went to graduate school, and my graduate program was research intensive. And being in research means collaborating. You have to work with other scientists. You have to share your data. You have to share your reagents for experiments. You know, if someone asks you for a favor, you do it. You don't think twice. You always make yourself available to help other people, and that's so beneficial.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconception about collaboration. I think people think, well, I'll just go in and collaborate, but it really is a skill that's developed. And so if you don't have that developed skill, it's not like you're going to just walk into a place and all of a sudden be able to collaborate. You have to develop that as, you know, how to be a good team player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it takes a while, especially if you haven't collaborated much, you know, maybe in high school, middle school, but it 100% it's a skill that you have to develop.
Yeah. So let's move on a little bit into the med school thing. I know that you're excited. You said you're going off to med school in a month. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's like a month and a half.
Okay. A little bit different of a process, I'm sure. But what was it like applying to medical school? I know you're trying to get finished with UCLA and finish in the best way possible, but what was it like applying to medical school?
Yeah, that's also a really great question. So when I realized that I wanted to be a doctor, that I wanted to go to medical school, I remember learning about the admissions process and the application process, and I remember thinking how intense it was. And I would tell my friends about it, and they were also interested in graduate school. You know, like some of my friends went to get PhDs or masters, and their process is completely different. So essentially, the way that it works is you can the earliest you can apply is at the end of your third year. And the reason why that's the earliest you can apply is because the med school admissions process is a year-long process. So there's a primary application that you fill out. The primary application has your personal statement, and the question to the personal statement is always, why do you want to be a doctor, or why do you want to go to medical school? And then in addition to that, there's 15 entries for your extracurricular activities, where you list what you did, you list how many hours you were involved, total hours you were involved, and you list what there's also a point where you can pick 3 out of those 15, and you can say these 3 were my most meaningful experiences, and you can elaborate more on those experiences. So yeah, you fill out your primary app, and usually people turn that in late May, early June, because that's when the cycle opens. And once you submit your primary, if a school is interested in you, they'll send you a supplemental application. Those are called secondaries. And each school has their own supplemental application. So some schools have really long supplemental applications, like Duke Medical School. It's notoriously known to have one of the most intense supplemental applications. There are other schools that have easier ones where there's like really fun short essays that you write, like Keck School of Medicine at USC. That was probably one of my favorites. But when a school sends you the secondary, you fill it out and you return it to them. And secondaries are usually filled out over the summer. And then in the fall and in the winter is when interviews happen. So if you send a school your secondary and they like you, they'll ask to interview you. And so you just go to the interview, you learn a little bit more about the school, you get to meet the other people at your interview day. And after interviews, decisions usually come out late winter, early spring. And the thing about applying to medical school is that a lot of medical schools are rolling admission. So what that means is the sooner you apply, the sooner you get your interview, and the sooner you hear an acceptance. The sooner you hear back about an acceptance. So I know a lot of people that apply, they submit their primary application late, and then they get secondaries late. And then by the time they finish their secondary, the schools have already sent out most of their interview invites. So it's a little bit harder for you to get an interview invite at that point. But there are other schools. I know Stanford. Stanford doesn't do this. Columbia, Harvard. There are a few other schools. They're not rolling admissions, so it doesn't matter when you submit your materials. If they like you, they'll send you an interview invite. Yeah, so it's a 1 year it's a 1 year application process. If you want to start med school as soon as you finish undergrad, then you submit your application at the end of your 3rd year. And if you don't do that, then because personal reasons to yourself, maybe you want to go to graduate school, maybe you want experience working in biotech, maybe you want to work with a community clinic, whatever you want to do, maybe you want to explore some of your interests before you dedicate your life to medicine. Those people they're known as enrichment years between the time that you finish undergrad to the time that you apply to medical school.
All right. It seems like a big process, so congratulations definitely on getting into Stanford. But can you tell us a little bit about the MCAT exam and how you prepared for it?
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you that don't know, so the MCAT is essentially the SAT for medical school. It's a standardized test that you take. The MCAT covers topics ranging from general chemistry, physics, organic chemistry. There's actually 4 sections. The first section is like those hard sciences, so Gen Chem, OChem, physics. The second section is it's a critical reading section where you read passages and you answer questions about those passages. The third section is biochem, and the last section is psychology and sociology. And the test, it's a really long test. It's 7 hours and 30 minutes. I don't know how many questions there are. I think it was like 230 or something like that. Actually, let me look that up because I don't want to give out wrong information. Hold on. $230, yeah. So 230 questions. See, it's a really long test. So studying for the exam, you have to build endurance. Because I remember taking my MCAT, and I remember towards the end of the exam just feeling exhausted. You're reading passages and you're answering all these really tricky worded questions, and you have to use your brain for like 6 hours, and they give you like these really small breaks when you don't have enough time to reset your brain. So training for that, it's like running a marathon. You at first you start, you don't go into a marathon. You don't go into marathon training running the distance of a marathon. You build up to it, and that's kind of how it is training your endurance for the MCAT. You kind of like got to build up to it. But the way that I did it was I studied for the MCAT over the summer, and I made sure that I wasn't doing anything else besides studying for the MCAT because it takes a lot of time. I mentioned all those topics that are covered in those 4 sections. It's a lot of material. It's essentially everything that you learned your first 2 years of college. So you want to give yourself enough time to be able to review everything and make sure that you understand all those topics. Because when you go to take the actual exam, you just have to be ready for anything. The exam isn't going to ask you questions about every single topic. It's gonna pick a section and ask you a question about it. And if that's the section you're weak in, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So you have to make sure that you understand all those concepts from your first 2 years of college. So like I said, I studied for it over the summer. It was 3 months long. I studied a total of 520 hours, and I would keep track of my hours every week to make sure I was on target to study 520 hours before I took the exam. There are books that you can buy, review books that have all the content, and essentially what you do is you just read the book, you make notes, you keep track of what you do know, like your strengths and your weaknesses, and then you supplement the content in the books with practice tests. So there are a bunch of different practice tests. You don't essentially have to pay for them. If you know friends, you can split the cost. Or sometimes if you know an upperclassman that doesn't need access to those tests anymore, they could just give you access. Technically, it's not allowed, but I think it's unfair how expensive all these testing materials are. It doesn't make it accessible to a lot of people. So, if you have the opportunity to do that, do it. So yeah, there's like different testing platforms. There's one called UWorld, which is really good. They give you a lot of practice problems, which is super important because, I mentioned about content. There's a lot of content on the MCAT exam, but knowing the content can only take you so far. You not only have to train for the endurance of the exam, you not only have to train to make sure you understand the content, but you also have to train to be able to answer the questions the way that they're worded, because the test makers word their questions in a specific way, and they have a special logic that they use. And the only way you can really master that logic to be good at answering those styles of questions is just by doing practice problems. And like I said, UWorld is a really great resource to be able to it's a really great resource with a lot of practice problems that you can just keep doing.
Yeah. That's great. You touched on the cost, right? It's expensive for all of these testing materials. Let's talk about how expensive med school is. How much is, I know they're all different, but you've probably been dealing with this over and over again, but how much is med school? If we're talking to our students saying, hey, if you're looking at doing this is what medical school costs. And are you taking out loans in order to pay for some of that?
Yeah, that's a really important aspect of applying to medical school that I think a lot of people stress out about. I actually don't know the median indebtedness of a medical school graduate. Can I look that up? I'm like interested.
Sure, go ahead.
Interested in kind of knowing.
We don't want to throw you for a loop and you're like, oh no, I don't want to go
now. So the average medical school graduate comes out with $200,000 in debt. And
is that just graduate school?
Yeah, I think that's just for med school. There's a really nice resource called the MSAR, and what the MSAR has is it has all the information for the accredited MD programs in the United States. And towards the bottom, they have financial aid information. And each school has different amounts of funding. And, depending on what school you go, you should expect to take on a certain amount of indebtedness. There are some schools where their graduates come out with essentially relatively very low levels of debt for medical school. I know Stanford is one of those schools because they have a lot of funding, and they're able to give a lot of money to their medical students to where they don't have to take out loans. And I think the average indebtedness for for a Stanford medical student is around $90,000. And, you know, just to put that in perspective, that is one of the lowest. So $90,000 for a medical school education. And compared to the median, which is $200,000. So yeah, definitely figuring out how to finance your medical education can be a struggle for some people. But I also want to mention that there are some schools that are dedicated to ensuring that their students graduate loan free. And by that, I mean, the only schools that I know that do this are Stanford, Columbia, Cornell. I think that's it. There's a list of them. It's not a lot of medical schools, but essentially what they do is they figure out how much you can reasonably pay depending on, you know, how much money your parents make and how much money you make if you're working before you apply to medical school. So they give you that number, and then they calculate how much loans you would need to take out. And then they just replace the loans with scholarship money. So essentially, if that's you know, one of the cases that you fall into, then you would not have to pay. You would graduate medical school debt free. And $90,000 isn't a lot when you think about how much money doctors make when they subspecialize. So if you know, if you want to go to medical school and the university gives you your financial aid package, and you realize that you're going to graduate with like $120,000 in debt, I would feel comfortable with that amount of debt, because I should mention this. I would feel comfortable with that amount of debt if I want to specialize, because if you specialize, it's commonly known that physicians or surgeons that specialize make more money than physicians that go into primary care, which I think it's a super unfortunate truth, because that deters people away from going into primary care. And especially if you graduate with a huge amount of debt, you know, you're kind of shut out from primary care, because if you go into primary care, you're going to have a hard time paying that back. And some schools have taken steps to kind of address that. Like I said, you know, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, they're making this debt-free thing to kind of alleviate that debt burden, so more people choose to go into primary care. And then there are other schools like UCLA. They have this this scholarship called the Geffen Scholarship. And if you get chosen for the Geffen Scholarship, it's a full ride. You don't have to pay anything. They give you money to go to the school. So that they pay for your gas, they pay for your housing, they pay all tuition, and then they give you a stipend on top of it. So some schools have really great scholarship programs like that. I think University of Pennsylvania also has something like that. It's called like the 21st Century Scholarship. And then if you are a low income student like myself, my parents don't make a lot of money. There's a lot of need-based financial aid. And I think I'm really fortunate to where Stanford gave me my financial aid package and I don't have to take out loans. They essentially gave me money for my housing and my tuition and food. So, you know, I know a lot of people think about how expensive medical school is, and they come from a low-income family, low-income areas of the United States, and they automatically think that they can't afford medical school, when there are, in fact, a lot of opportunities for financial aid for students that are coming from these low-income backgrounds.
So yeah, you're just starting med school, right? You have your whole kind of future in front of you. And so with that kind of lens looking forward, what are some of your long-term professional goals as it pertains to your role in the medical field? Like, where do you see yourself post med school?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's actually something that I don't know yet. And I think it's important to note that I'm about to be a medical student, and I still don't know what I want to do. So don't feel like you have to know what you want to do in high school or in college. You have a lot of time to figure this stuff out. Um, yeah, I have no idea. I have interests, and for example, I I think that I love teaching and I love mentoring, and I love doing research. So I think the best place for me to be would be in the academic setting. So maybe practicing at UCLA, maybe practicing at USC, maybe staying in NorCal and practicing at like UCSF or Stanford, because of those aspects of my identity. I think I want to keep teaching, whether it's like medical students or residents or future patients. And I really love research. I want to get involved with research solving health disparities. And the best way to do that is to be at an academic institution. So I have these interests, but I think I have to wait and see until I actually experience that in medical school. Because right now I have no idea what it means to be a physician doing research in like these health disparities. I'm keeping myself open to these opportunities.
Great. I think you kind of answered our next question. We live in an area where we have this now growing medical field, right? So, are you thinking that when you're done, you would like to work locally here? Would you like to work somewhere else? I know you said UCLA or USC. I didn't know that was allowed for a UCLA student to say USC in a positive. But is there any desire to work locally, or are you looking more at looking to moving somewhere else and kind of taking your skills there?
I definitely want to come back to my community. I think that's I want to do something that impacts my community, and whether I find out how to do that through physically being there and practicing, or whether I figure out how to do that through my research. I think when I think about your question, that's kind of like what I think about. For example, I think it'd be really cool to have the opportunity to come back to Southern California after I finish my residency, my medical school training and my residency. And I think it'd be cool to go to my home community and to work at like a community clinic there. Or I think it'd be cool to be able to figure out how to address some of these health disparities that are currently present, in the AV. And I think it'd be cool to figure out how to come up with a solution and then go back and then implement that solution. So yeah, I think I definitely see myself coming back to Southern California and doing something for my community.
And just kind of wrapping things up, it's really cool you say that you have that desire to contribute back to your hometown. And even this interview, people are going to watch this, students are going to watch this. And I feel like the information you've given them is super real, super personal. And I feel like it's really going to help a lot of them make good decisions now in high school. And we have students who are going to UCLA in the fall. And so it's going to be really cool to see that. But just kind of wrapping everything up right now, our final question is just what suggestions or insights would you give to current high school students who right now have that inclination or that desire, that spark to attend medical school or go to the medical field at some point in the future?
Yeah, I would say kind of what I was saying earlier, to not be so set into what you want to do. I think if you have an interest in medicine, that's an incredible interest to have, and you should explore that interest. But don't neglect other opportunities, because you can actually do a lot with medicine. Like um, let's say you're a high school student and you're interested in medicine, and you have like this other interest in policy, or like in political science. And let's say that you never explore that interest because you're so set on just being a physician. I I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for the individual. When, let's say, you're in high school and you want to go to medical school, and you have this other interest, same interests. You're interested in like political science and policy, and you go out and you explore that interest, and you realize this is something I want to do in the future. You can figure out a way to like meld those interests together to where you're a physician, but you're also working with policy issues. You're utilizing that political science aspect that you also fell in love with. So yeah, I think always be open to trying new things, to exploring your interests. And being in high school, you have such a long way to go. Um, you have to go through college, and then uh, you have to take the MCAT. You have to go through the admissions process. So it's a long time, and along the way, definitely don't forget to you know partake in your passions. Like if you love playing basketball, don't neglect basketball because you feel like it's not going to help you get into medical school. Or if you love playing music, don't stop playing the piano because you feel like it's not going to benefit you in the future. So, you know, like I said, it's such a long process, and you have to make opportunities to explore your interests and really um, maintain that good mental health. Um, and the last thing I wanted to say was, so you said, what suggestions would you have for a student whose goal is to attend medical school? The last thing I wanted to say was, really develop a passion for service, because I know a lot of people talk about physician burnout, and it's a real thing, 100% real. Like medical students and medical residents and practicing physicians and surgeons, they burn out because being a doctor is incredibly demanding. So you really have to develop a passion for service, because if you go into medicine for the wrong reasons, I feel like the probability that you do experience physician burnout is just going to be much higher. And I feel like one way to kind of make sure, or one way to like best protect yourself from physician burnout is to really understand what it means to go into the medical field, and to have this passion for service. And you have to develop a passion for teaching, because it you want to be a physician that's teaching their patients how to take control of their health. And you also have to develop a passion for learning. uh, you know I'll say it again, this process, being an undergrad, applying to med school, going to med school, being a resident, and then being a physician, it's more than 8 years. Uh, that's a long time to be learning. And when you finish, and you're finally a doctor, the learning doesn't end there. You're learning for the rest of your life. There's going to be new advances. There's in medicine. There's going to be new ways to treat diseases, new ways to perform surgeries, and you're just going to be a lifelong learner. And if you feel like, damn, I hate learning. I don't want to. I want to just get this profession and then do it and not have to worry about like feeling like I'm in school all the time. Like really think about that, what it means to be a physician, and try to develop that passion for being a lifelong learner.
All right, well, Ivan, we really appreciate the time and all the insights you've given us into our students as well. I just want to say congratulations on UCLA, on going to Stanford. We wish you just the best of luck, and definitely we'll be keeping in touch and kind of tracking you through your progress.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to be able to come back and share my experiences, as a medical student, and even after that, being able to share my experiences, like applying to residencies and being a medical resident. So I'm always trying to figure out how to give back to my community. So it'd be cool if we could, keep this going.
Yeah, sounds great, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ivan. We appreciate your time.